Hello, my dears. How are you doing today? Well, Grandma wants to read you another story from the Children's Book of Heroes. And this one is called A Prayer at Valley Forge. And this is a story about the Revolutionary War that can remind us that even in the worst of times, great men need help and they can look to God for it, especially if they're truly a great man. During the Revolutionary War, when Americans were fighting for their freedom, the British Army captured Philadelphia. They marched into town with flags flying and bands playing and made themselves at home for the winter. The fall of Philadelphia was a great blow to the Americans, for in those days it was the capital of the new nation. You see that picture? They're marching into Philadelphia. But George Washington's army was not strong enough to stop the British forces. Once the king's men were inside the city, the only thing the American general could do was see that they could not get into the countryside to do any mischief. So he was going to try to stop them from stealing and hurting people. So Washington led his men to Valley Forge, a place just a few miles from Philadelphia. There, the American army could spend the winter. It could defend itself if attacked, and it could keep close watch on the British. It would have been easier to fight many battles than to spend that winter in Valley Forge. It was December, and there was no shelter of any kind. The soldiers bravely set to work building huts for themselves. They made them out of whatever they could find, logs or fence rails, or just mud and straw. The snow drifted in at the windows, for they had no glass. The cold rain dripped through the roofs. The wind howled through every crack. There were few blankets, and many men slept shivering on the hard ground. Sometimes they sat up all night, crowding around the fires to keep from freezing. There was no heater that you could turn on in their houses like we have today. Their clothing was worse than their shelter. The whole army was in rags. Many of the men had no shirts. Even more were without shoes. Wherever they walked, the snow was marked with their blood. Some cut strips from their precious blankets and wound them around their feet to protect their feet from the freezing ground. Food was scanty. There wasn't much of it. Sometimes for several days, the soldiers went without meat. Sometimes they even went without bread. Around the camp, the groans of men who were sick and starving filled the air. Every evening when the sun sank, the officers wondered if the army could hold together even one more day. Here are some more pictures. You see the men in the snow, because there were no houses. They had to build themselves shelters, whatever they could find. Do you like camping in the snow? Maybe for a day or two, it might be fun if you've got the right equipment. But these men were there for days and weeks and months, living in the snow, not having much to eat or warm clothing. They were cold and miserable. One cold day, a Quaker farmer was walking along a creek at Valley Forge when he heard the murmur of a solemn voice. Creeping in its direction, he discovered a horse tied to a tree, but no rider. The farmer stole nearer, following the sound of the voice. Through a thicket, he saw a lone man on his knees in the snow. It was General Washington. His cheeks were wet with tears as he prayed to the Almighty for help and guidance. The farmer slipped quietly away. When he reached home, he said to his wife, "Hannah, my dear, all is well. The Americans will win their independence. George Washington will succeed. What makes thee think so, Isaac? She asked. I have heard him pray, Hannah, out in the woods today. He said, if there is anyone on this earth the Lord will listen to, it is this brave man. He will listen, Hannah, rest assured, he will. So that farmer, after hearing George Washington pray, was convinced that the Lord would hear and answer his prayers. The farmer was right. When at last the harsh winter melted away and a soft green crept over the hillsides, George Washington's army still lived. Against all odds, it had outlasted the cruel Valley Forge snows. With new hope, the Patriots marched away behind their brave commander to fight the British and to win their freedom. See that picture of George Washington praying in the snow? His horse is tied to the tree. And there's the farmer who has come out walking in the woods and seen George Washington. Grandma really likes this story, and I am very impressed with George Washington. We were very blessed to have him to be the leader of our nation and to fight for our freedom. And Grandma likes this story so much that Grandma and Grandpa have a painting done by Arnold Freeberg, and it's about George Washington praying at Valley Forge. Because the Lord, I believe, helped George Washington so that he could lead the American army and help us to become a new nation and have a place that we could be free and live according to our own conscience and not have to be told and ordered around and told what to do, that we could be free to choose. And so we are very blessed. And George Washington was a great man, and he prayed. And I hope that we, when times get tough and hard, we won't be at Valley Forge, but we will have our own trials that are just as hard. And if we remember to pray, the Lord will also hear our prayers and strengthen us and help us in doing what we need to do. So remember to pray, and remember, Grandma loves you.